Our August 6th meeting of the Planning Board to order. This meeting is being videotaped. You may record it yourself. I doubt if you will. But if you do, just let us know so we can make accommodations. Tonight, let's see, do we have our agendas in front of us? We have a continuation request. So that's the first thing. So the library is their application for their special permit. They've asked for a continuance.
Which technically, since you're only making a recommendation, it
will be on our next meeting.
Yeah, that was just left on the agenda
Okay.
for public purposes, so that they could really see that it wasn't going to be discussed tonight.
Excellent. So we'll move on. And I think we might as well just do this A&R.
Okay.
I think,
give me.
yeah, we saw this, gosh, it was like 9 months ago, something like that. Maybe it was a year.
Yeah. I think the decision was in February or March of last year. So, are all of you on the board? Mm-hmm.
Not February of
last year? No.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
It's been a while.
And I was actually trying to remember, there was an abutter who had raised an issue relative to this, and I think we even set some conditions or something
Right.
about this.
So
if you
this
could
is
remind
towards
us.
the end of Garfield. This is a long road that comes in. There's two more houses here, but this was a historically significant home and cottage. And in the zoning bylaw, by special permit, you can get reduced frontage, setbacks, area to preserve historically significant structures. So to divide this, they would have had to go through the middle of the house. So the planning board reviewed it, made a recommendation that the special permit be granted, went to the Board of Appeals. They granted this configuration for the reduced frontage area lot. A special permit was granted, recorded. There is a historic preservation restriction now on both of these structures that had to go through the whole formal process through the Historical Commission, the Select Board. That's been done. They're still working. There was conditions regarding water and sewer because it's really funky how the water main actually comes up through this person's property and down. I can't remember what road this is.
Not Garfield?
No.
Valley Road?
Valley Road, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and they had no documentation on water lines and easements, and so that was one of the conditions of approval. So they're still working on, they've documented where the water lines come in. They're still working on the whole easement language, which in your agenda memo, I note that it was condition 2F, that they work with water and sewer on the easement locations and language, and so they're still working on that. That was this was filed on Friday. I wasn't able to get in conversation with the Public Works Water and Sewer engineer till Monday. So after speaking with her, she has a meeting with the attorney and to finish up working out the easements, but she was comfortable with how things are laid out. As far as the property lines are all still the same, and the actual location of the water lines has been mapped already. To recommend that the board endorse the plan subject to those conditions being satisfied before the plan gets signed.
Right. And I mean, just to mention, I mean, this is obviously out in the AA zoning district.
Oh, yeah.
And there's lots of land around here. And so you might wonder why such a tiny little lot, but they wanted to maintain an equestrian use here with a minimum 5 acres. So that was one thing they stated. So, and then there's this road. So it's a little complicated, and that's how they ended up with such a small, little, strange-looking lot. Okay, so, and because of the special permit, we can approve this, we can endorse this even though it doesn't
Yeah.
have the frontage and all that stuff.
Yep, so the recording information for the special permit is on here.
Right.
There's also was a condition that it referenced the preservation restriction, which will be recorded with this plan. And it also references one of the other conditions was that that this lot cannot be further divided or reduced in area.
Okay. So actually, I think I'm just going to go ahead and move this since I was here. And so I move that we endorse the approval not required plan for Joyce M. Lawrence for 317 Garfield Road by Stancy and McNary Incorporated, dated August 5th, 2019. It was revised 2019, August 5th, 2019. Original plan was in October 2017. Subject to the satisfaction of conditions of approval of the special permit under section 6.3.3 and 11.6 of the zoning bylaw, and recorded in the Middlesex South Registry of Deeds in book 70756, page 280, and authorize the chair, myself, the clerk, or the town planner to endorse the plan. Any?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion? All those in favor? Okay. So the A&R taken care of. So, and now we're back to our usual standing topic, which is, well, the thing that's ahead of us is we've got the meeting with the ZBA tomorrow. So tonight is kind of a prep meeting for that. The other thing that Elizabeth got to do between our last meeting and this one is she drafted up an accessory dwelling unit bylaw. And I just was curious if folks had a chance to look at that. So let's start with that, because I think we'd want to discuss that with the ZBA if people are amenable. I think it pretty accurately captures the things that we had on our little table. I'm trying to think if there are any innovations in this, but I don't think.
You know, the only thing I would like to point out is, once I find it. I find my copy.
Yeah, you made a comment on the one you sent out, right?
Yes, that's what I'm looking for.
One of the things that we've done in order to get around not having a special permit and yet still try to make some accommodations for neighbors and so forth is just to give the building inspector the power to require additional landscaping and fencing. So, you know, basically, we wouldn't have to go in and adjudicate these things, but the building inspector would be able to.
So, so a couple of things on that note. After
Yeah.
speaking with the building commissioner, one, he does not feel that's appropriate.
He doesn't want to be the adjudicator of that.
They have, you know, there's three different local inspectors. None of them are, you know,
Very
landscape-
aesthetically oriented.
Well, none of them are landscape architects. None of them are architects. None of them, you know, they interpret the bylaw in a very factual manner, not, you know, subjective. And he will be coming to the meeting tomorrow night.
Okay.
With the board and the ZBA. His one suggestion today was that if, you know, landscaping or screening is important, just to embed that as one of the requirements, whether it's a, you know, a 5-foot landscape, you know, a landscape buffer with, you know, evergreens, or, you know, some actual mechanism where they can look at a plan, they can go out and look at it and say, yes, That's
Okay.
a 5-foot lands, but not to make it a subjective item
Okay.
for them to, interpret, because it's not in their wheelhouse, and there's different inspectors, so.
Okay.
So that was one comment, and, he'll be prepared to talk about that more, tomorrow night.
I'm sorry, you guys maybe are a little more plugged into what so these two pieces of paper.
Yep.
One is is this existing bylaw, and this
Nope.
is as it's,
Nope, so, this one just shows where all the strikeouts and changes, and this is just a clean version.
the strikeouts and changes that are proposed
Yes.
to move at town meeting.
Yes. Well,
this
so
is-
Well, we're
my,
gonna do a full replace, so this will be the replacement, but for people to see the effect of the replacement, they need the red line.
it would be very difficult to do
Fair
a
enough.
strikeout and replace
Yeah, it-
for this many changes.
Yeah, logistically, I'm concerned, so this is showing us the changes, and this is meant to address to allow, which one of the things here is this two-family dwelling units?
No,
No,
this
this
is
is-
just accessory
This
dwelling.
is just
Accessory dwelling units, okay.
Yep, so what it effectively does is it gets rid of, it allows for detached structures. It removes the requirement that if you want to have it in a single-family dwelling, that the house has to be built for 2 years. It
Gets rid of the
limits,
special permit.
it limits the size of an accessory dwelling to 750 square feet or 1,000 square feet by special permit. It,
Well, it says you can't do short-term rentals.
yep,
It says,
and, the dwelling unit shall meet the required setbacks for the primary structure. If you want to go closer than that, so by special permit, you can get relief for a dwelling unit on a lot with less than the required lot size, up to 1,000 square feet, or a reduction in setbacks for a detached dwelling unit, provided the board finds that literal application of the requirement would be unreasonable and that the desired relief may be granted without substantial detriment to the neighborhood and without degrading from the intent and purpose of the bylaw.
Clause O is different on these two different drafts.
Yeah, so this is why I do that, because things change. Yep, so that's where,
You did the bed and breakfast because there's a
So-
section of the bylaw
so
for
I
that.
started with that it shall not be a short-term rental.
Right.
We do not have a definition of
Right.
short-term rental. So that's currently, if somebody has an accessory dwelling in their house and they want to do like Airbnb or a short-term rental, the building commissioners have established a determination that you're basically operating a bed and breakfast, just not, providing breakfast, but, and that you get a special permit from the Board of Appeals, which allows for notification in the paper and notification of abutters. We feel that has worked very well. It doesn't stop people from doing things illegally, but, every once in a while, people go and see something on Airbnb and file a zoning complaint. So after speaking with him, it would be very difficult to put in a new definition for short-term rental without defining all the other characteristics. So O got changed to read that the single-family dwelling or the dwelling unit shall not be used for a bed and breakfast unless a special permit is granted under 5.315.
So don't offer breakfast.
No, there actually are a
Just
couple of actual
No,
real
there
bed
are
and
real bed and
breakfasts in
breakfasts. No,
Concord.
I'm just
so-
saying it.
I'm sorry, O would be changed to also reference short-term rental?
No, it would be changed
to
from the
reference-
short-term rental to this.
To reference the bed and breakfast. So sadly, these don't match and
Yeah,
they should.
sorry. We'll get there.
So-
I get how that happens.
Yeah.
And then Matt had raised a comment, which is on the back of the one sheet, that based upon this, it looks like a property owner could not exceed the floor area ratio to construct an accessory dwelling even by special permit, which the answer is yes.
Yes, they couldn't?
That is correct. They could not, construct an accessory dwelling unit and go over the floor area ratio.
Okay.
And so, you know, I just noted that when I saw it, because we are enumerating the things that the ZBA can do, and that's not one of them that we're offering up. Now, someone can apply for their dwelling to go over the floor area ratio, and they could do that, and then they could apply for this.
Well, so here's, and so this was the other thing I wanted to talk about. So in this section, you're only dealing with these restrictions under 4222, and that the board can grant a waiver to these restrictions. So nowhere in here does it say anything about the restriction regarding the floor area ratio. So that's specifically a separate section under 6.
Right, so someone would have to separate special
So-
permit application,
Which allows
basically.
you for all buildings. So
Yeah,
somebody could apply for 4222 and the floor area ratio maximum under 6213
yeah.
in a special permit.
Right, because people, or height, or there are
Right.
100 things you could ask for.
Right, so
Yeah.
I don't think it precludes
It doesn't
somebody.
preclude it. Okay, so I think that comment's just a non sequitur or a.
Can I loop back, and this is a problem of me not having read it beforehand, so I'm just catching up. So going back to O, the reason to go from a short-term rental to bed and breakfast is,
Because we have language
This
to
is a
cover
bed
it in the
definition.
bylaw, what a bed and breakfast is.
okay. So we do in fact want to say can't be used for bed and breakfast.
Right.
Correct.
And the reason we wouldn't be concerned about short-term rental that did not involve the serving of breakfast is,
So currently, short-term rentals are not defined in the zoning bylaw. So anything that is not expressly allowed or stated in the zoning bylaw is prohibited. And historically, I'm going to say the last 10 years or more, kind of even before Airbnb, somebody came into the building commissioner and said, I want to rent out, I have an accessory dwelling, I want to, rent it out, to people who come for the weekend. And the commissioner made the determination that you would need a special permit under a bed and breakfast to do that.
So basically, that's our
Because
euphemism.
Because a bed and breakfast is defined.
But you can't operate your Airbnb without having a special permit here. And so, in some ways, we don't even have to say this here, but it's good to make it clear because it is one of the things that immediately someone would think of, like, oh, well, we could rent that out, you know.
So it defines that the board may, by special permit, authorize the use of a single-family detached dwelling unit for temporary accommodations for overnight guests for a fee, provided that no more than 3 rooms in any dwelling unit may be used for such accommodations.
oh, so when you look at the definition, it actually has nothing to do with the
Breakfast.
serving of breakfast.
No, it doesn't, it's just a term. But
Right.
anybody who has come in for a special permit says, well, and I'm not gonna be serving breakfast, so. That does kind of lead to one question so part of, when you think about zoning bylaw amendments, is going through the whole entire bylaw and thinking
Yeah.
about unintended consequences. So
You never have that.
this section O says, you can't use the single-family dwelling or the dwelling unit unless you get a special permit under a bed and breakfast. But
Mhm.
currently, so that means to allow a detached accessory dwelling unit to somebody meets all these requirements, gets a building permit, their, mom moves in for a couple years and then they move her somewhere else and they have this and they want to do a short-term rental for a while. So currently, if that is one of an intended use that the board is considering, then this section 5315 would also have to be amended to allow detached accessory dwellings.
Oh, it's only attached as it's written
Well, no,
down.
it only says use of a single-family detached dwelling unit. So an accessory dwelling unit would not be considered a
An attached
single-family.
one.
Would not be considered a single-family
Okay.
dwelling unit.
So,
So, and that's another thing, we may actually physically have to,
Well, but-
specifically add a definition of
well, maybe
detached
we start
accessory
with it.
dwelling.
Okay, because, so right now, if it's detached, it would still be possible, but if it was attached, it would not, because it would no longer be a single-family dwelling.
No, so,
It still wouldn't work in either case.
it
5.3,
Well, it just says a single-family dwelling. So this is something that kind of needs to still be, thought
Okay.
about as far as when do you have to amend other sections of the bylaw when you change something?
Right.
And when do you need to add another definition? So,
because we could potentially just wait on that one, right? We could try to take care of it this year, but we could also just say, we'll worry about those kind of details later. The 5.3.1.15, because, you could interpret it that
Well,
maybe
so-
for the first year, we don't have any of them be,
well, but so you
Airbnb
can
type things.
interpret it, so when you, so this is when you start thinking things through. So the 53113 says, for use, authorize the use of a single-family detached dwelling unit. So single-family detached dwelling, a structure containing one dwelling unit designed for and used exclusively as a single housekeeping unit. So for me, that means if you were to pass this accessory dwelling unit bylaw and allow detached, that does fall under the existing definition for a single-family detached dwelling.
I have another approach that I'd suggest, perhaps, which is initially for this bylaw, that we just strike the last bit of unless from O, and just simply don't allow this to start. Because, the point of this is not to create Airbnbs. That's not what we're trying to do here. We're trying to create new housing. So I don't see why we would even allow it with a special permit at the moment.
I think it would be much better received if we did not.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, so let's just cut unless and the rest of it.
So you probably leave the single-family dwelling or the dwelling, it should read accessory, probably accessory dwelling unit shall not be used for bed and breakfast pursuant under section 5.3.15.
That's right.
Okay.
I think that's, and then if later people want to say, well, yeah, but hey, maybe it'd be okay, then we can always come back and amend it. Okay. Other comments? I think that was a productive discussion, by the way. Thanks for bringing that up, Bert.
This is bringing beginner's mind to the discussion.
So, two other things. One, since, it is only August, the building commissioner still has a number of people coming in and, asking about this, and he's saying, well, there's a working draft already. He will, as people come in now, as he informs them, he'll say, well, let's look at the draft, bylaw and go through your specific, example and see if he finds any loopholes or questions or things that we didn't think about for the next few months. And,
To
you
get
know,
that
I think that'll
real-time
really
feedback.
be helpful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The other question from the last week at the select board meeting, somebody asked about the number of accessory dwelling units out there.
Yeah.
So in a very roundabout way, our GIS analyst worked with the assessor, and they pulled out of the assessor's database all the properties that had more than one property record card.
Okay.
So then went through, so those included the schools, and they took out commercial properties, but anything that was in, a residential district.
So even with the unified ownership, you'd get more than one rate card?
Yeah, you would get more than one record card, because this second record card would be for, a separate building. Although,
So this is for existing accessory units that are in,
this is for existing properties.
Yeah, so we were trying to find out how many two-families there are, how many accessory dwellings there are.
So, but there are many properties in town that have more than one property record card, just based on just everything that's on that property. So, went through this list and just took out, clearly, like the schools and municipal land and housing authority and apartments with more than, 8 units and those types of things, and came up with unverified approximately 187 properties with 2 property record cards, but some of them had like 6 structures on it, and so I haven't even narrowed it down further. There were only 42 properties that specifically had the use category of multiple houses on one parcel. So that's kind of the best
Yeah, it's a
ballpark
small
I can
number.
give you
Yeah.
right now.
It's helpful though.
It's not a significant number.
All right, 1% of the housing stock, a little less.
so that would represent somebody has a house, a lot, and they've built more than one home. I'm not sure what the criteria is for a rate card, you said?
Property record card.
Record card. What triggers, if I own a property and I build a pool house and then I build a guest house, what's the trigger for a rate card?
Record card.
Record card.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying. Some of these might have more than one property record card, but it's because they built, a detached barn and a pool house and a separate workshop. And so every time the assessor goes out and has to do an assessment, do the square footage, value something out, it adds.
So a record card is almost just like a sheet in the file,
Yeah.
where the
Yeah.
assessor says,
Yeah.
oh, and then they built this house, and
So
that's where.
each time you add a foundation, is that what you need a record card, or? is it-
I don't,
I see. Well,
Okay.
the technical
whenever the assessor,
decides.
So,
finds something of value to assess on your property, it goes on the property
Yes,
record card.
and that would or would not include detached garages.
So it would include detached garages. That's why I'm saying from 187, down to only 42 said multiple houses on one parcel. So multiple houses on one parcel, I can confirm there's at least 42 accessory dwellings in
Already
town.
existing, yeah.
Whether that goes up from there, I mean, it probably, but I don't see it being significant.
So I'm just saying, like, 108, even the 187 seems low if you're
Mhm.
including detached garages, which would be potential
Well,
sites for,
so I'll
accessory
have to,
dwelling.
I'll have to verify. I'm not sure if just a house and a detached garage causes a second property record
Right.
card.
okay.
I have one question about this. Did we have a discussion on the maximum and minimum gross square footage?
Yes.
We did. I may have missed that meeting.
The first meeting, I think, that we discussed it.
All right. We just thought 750, that's a good number.
Well,
Wait,
720
no,
was
it
the
was
original
actually,
number.
there was actually reasoning behind it.
Yes.
Two-car garage.
A two-car garage that could be converted into an apartment,
Or have a floor above.
far above.
Seemed a
What was it,
reasonable-
24
And
by
he knew what the
30?
dimensions of the,
24 by 26
Six or
is
something,
is
yeah.
like a standard two-car garage.
Yeah.
so that's how that calculation
That
came
magic
about,
number.
that
And then
estimate.
you could get to 1,000 with a special permit.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so to follow that discussion, previously the zoning bylaw had a limit on number of bedrooms. And that was deleted because if you have between, 750 by right, that's gonna
Dictate
limit.
the
You're not
bedrooms.
gonna have, a kitchen and
A four-bedroom,
and
750 square foot.
four
house.
bedrooms, and so, I mean, that in itself, the size would limit the number of bedrooms, even up to
I
1,000.
gotcha. Okay.
Well, and then septic, if you had septic, that would be another constraint.
Did we have to learn anything about public works and things like that effect on this? Is that coming?
So now that that
Okay.
you actually have something drafted, I was gonna forward it to the Public Works Director, forward it to, for the Public Works Commission, the Finance Committee, and the School Committee.
Okay.
And the question being, I think it's more difficult to have a really robust discussion if a couple of board members are going to one meeting for the Public Works Commission, then a couple go to one meeting for the Finance Committee, one meeting for the School Committee. So I was gonna reach out to the Public Works Director, the Finance Director, the School Superintendent, to see if maybe, middle of September, we can try and have a joint meeting with all of them, specifically on the
Mhm.
topic of zoning bylaw amendments. Starting with like accessory dwelling bylaw, where all of them are interested, and then getting down to something where, members of the school committee might want to leave, or the Public Works Committee are down to having a conversation with the Finance Committee.
Yeah. I mean, like our PRD changes don't really have any impact on the school committee,
Right.
our proposed PRD.
So that was gonna be
And-
my suggestion.
But in theory, the accessory dwelling and the two-family dwelling shouldn't necessarily affect school. I mean, that's going to be the big concern.
No, but I think that there's
hearing-
going to be discussion
Right.
about whether they will.
Exactly,
Yes.
and I think we have to have that information that was presented to us about and the types of housing and the types of people and families who might be living in it and how
Right.
that affects school-age population.
Well, and also, because I did end up having a conversation afterwards with one of the school committee members, and that was her,
Oh,
well,
sure.
she didn't necessarily find that being an issue.
Okay.
But that was gonna be a topic of discussion.
Right.
And I think with the updated comprehensive long-range plan where, by 2030, was it 5% of Concord's population is gonna be over 65?
Yeah.
So it's not, the number of school-age children in the community, one, going down as a factor just of family dynamics, but two, also going down because of the population, an aging population, that, there's a threshold in the school system where you have either
Okay.
too many kids and you hire more teachers, or the enrollment goes down to where you start thinking about laying off teachers.
Mhm.
So, there's a balance even for the school committee to,
Okay.
whether it's, maintain.
Well, and they
level
have
of
their
service or-
projections
yeah.
that they maintain, yeah.
Well,
Their
with
methodology
the
for
last
delivery.
comprehensive long-range plan, by now, we would have had a new elementary school and a new middle school, a second middle school. I mean,
You mean an additional one based on population
yeah,
growth?
yeah, the population growth estimates in,
In the 2005 plan?
is it the or is that the 1989 plan?
I was going to
Oh,
say, it's an
yeah.
older plan, yeah.
The 89
Back then,
plan,
there was going to be
was gonna have
growth.
to have, 2 additional schools built.
Wow.
Well, anyway, I also wanted to mention that the wake of the select board meeting, I had a call with Mike Lawson, and he gave positive feedback about our initiatives. He was interested in seeing the draft accessory bylaw language. I mentioned to him my idea that for these estimates of like, well, what, the great question that was asked at the select board meeting was, what do we think the number of new units will be generated out of this? I mean, which is, you know, it's a crystal ball thing, but it's also a legitimate question. And I proposed that Liz Rust of our regional housing office would be probably the best position to look at that, because first of all, there's some communities that have recently passed some accessory dwelling unit bylaws. Second of all, she's responsible for drafting the housing production plan. So this would clearly be an element of the housing production plan, and that's due next year. So, you know, this is
Which-
kind of,
Which they're not gonna be updating by next year.
really, we're not gonna get to it.
No, it will lapse for a year. at
Okay,
least.
but that, you know, this is good preliminary work for that. So, you know, Mike said that he was gonna talk to Liz about other issues anyway, and that he would bring this up. And then the third thing was, I said that as part of these initiatives, we're gonna need to do more public outreach in the fall, and that we're likely to have kind of a public meeting to discuss our proposals. And he offered that the select board co-sponsor it with us, which I thought was helpful. So that was the upshot of our conversation. So anything else on accessory dwellings? Should we move on to the ZBA meeting tomorrow night? Because it's got a broader set of topics. Okay. So we're meeting jointly with the ZBA tomorrow, and we're gonna talk to them about our housing choice initiatives, but also about some changes in who grants special permits, also about our parking guidelines that we're thinking of turning into bylaw language, and a few other minor details. I think that one of the sensitivities that the zoning board will have is the load that we may be placing upon them if there are lots of special permit criteria, but I think that we have a good answer on that. And then the other is just, since they enforce the bylaws, you know, what out of these things would they consider either difficult or problematic? So we hope to get feedback from them on all of that.
I don't know if you want to go through.
Yeah, well, maybe we should
Just one more.
enumerate the things we're gonna go through. So the accessory dwelling unit, as we just did, we'll bring up the two-family dwelling units where we are proposing to require a special permit. And there, actually, Elizabeth, I was trying to think of, while we don't need a draft bylaw language, it'd be nice to understand what sections of the bylaw would need to be changed. I mean, is it as simple as a table change? No, it's probably more complex than that. But I don't know, I couldn't offhand think of, okay, what would it look like to add two-family to, let's say, just residence C. Let's ignore the overlay district for concept for now. And so,
So we're just talking, somebody
By
could do
special
a
permit.
two-family by special, all other requirements as far as setbacks or
well, that
waivers
table that
or-
we had, I think it did sound like it was pretty conventional in every other respect.
So,
I mean, we weren't having any different dimensional requirements. There were no maximum number of residents or anything.
So we'd
so
be,
currently, a two-family is allowed by special permit, only under section 4221, which is, the board may grant a special permit for the alteration and use of a building existing at the time its lot is placed in a single residence district for not more than 2 dwelling units provided, and it lists those exclusions as far as, gross floor area excluding basements, open screen porches, that any additions shall not exceed in all 1/5 of the gross floor area, that the additional dwelling unit has to be integral to and a part of the existing building. So that section right there would need to be changed. And
I thought we were striking or replacing that, even as with the accessory dwelling unit bylaw.
well, no, because currently somebody who has a barn that was built in before 1929 can convert that barn to a two-family by special permit in
Right.
any
But-
zone district.
Right, okay, and that's why we would,
Yeah.
because I thought, well, once we have the accessory dwelling unit bylaw, do we still need that? But I guess it's still a little bit different.
You would still need that.
Okay.
Where's that year referenced?
So it's not, so at the time its lot is placed in a single
okay.
residence district.
Okay, so that's
So,
what-
so everything that wasn't in a commercial district already in 1929 was in a single residence district.
Hmm.
And the commercial districts have only gotten bigger, or other districts, types of districts have been added. So if your structure was built, after 1929, you were either already in a commercial district that's been retained, or you were in a single residence district already.
Okay, so, but then getting back to the two-family, so to enable two-family for residence C, what would we have to do? By special permit? We would just amend 4221?
We'll have to amend 4221 in some manner.
Okay. And do we already have a definition of two-family, or is two-family maybe a statewide already understood?
No, I'm pretty sure we have a.
Yeah, we do 1326.
Okay, so we have two-family. Great. So I think it's going to be very few words that are going to be added to the bylaw to do this if we go forward with it. I just was going to try to characterize that for the ZBA tomorrow. Because again, they're going to be the ones that have to enforce it.
I'll try and think about it tomorrow.
Okay,
I always find it hard to think that there's going to be a zoning bylaw to allow some new use that's only going to be a few words. So, I'll try and think more about that tomorrow.
well, we have a table of uses that when you click to
Well-
say yes, then suddenly things happen, you know?
Well, it's already in the table uses as a special permit under 4221.
There you go.
So,
So all we have to do is amend 4221 then, yeah.
I think
Okay.
so, but
All right.
I'm not hard to believe.
So then that's the second thing we'll talk about. The third thing is about the tightening up of the PRD. And I think that the focus here, just to remind folks, is we want to make the open space truly useful open space that perhaps provides a public amenity where possible. We want to limit the parking and or the number of garage bays because people are doing too many garages. And then we want to perhaps increase the percentage of upland that's required. And then site plan approval, because right now we don't have site plan approval. And then we could be the permit granting authority. And your rationale too was that we're already the permit granting authority for some other related items.
Correct. So the planning board is already the permit granting authority for residential compounds and residential clusters,
Which is really strange if we're not PRD, because they're
PRDs.
very parallel.
which is also really strange for hammerhead lots.
Uh-huh.
Because the board is the one that reviews subdivisions. So if somebody wanted to create a new lot,
Yeah,
that doesn't seem to fit. So whenever there's, a development pattern for new development,
yeah.
I just thought it was more appropriate
But
that the
for
planning
planning.
board.
Now, at present, we don't even see hammerhead lots at all. We don't even make a recommendation, right? And,
No, you don't.
you're right, and I don't think, have any of them come before the ZBA in recent times?
Oh, yeah, they just approved one
What
Oh, really?
21 days ago.
Hammerhead lot, it's where there's not a lot of frontage, it goes
You're
back.
required to have 50
Okay.
feet of frontage, and then the dimensional requirements, where the house is located, you have to have a 300-foot circle. The lot has to be, a certain size.
It's when you see a house set back behind others.
Yeah.
So sometimes they're called flag lots.
Okay.
Is that when you're saying a new lot size is being created and it's going to the ZBA? Or like-
No, so for a hammerhead lot,
Like, how does it happen that that's coming before them?
it's allowed
It's a
by
special
special
permit.
permit.
I know, but is there a lot that's being divided?
Yes.
Okay. So it's like an approval not required, but it
Approval's required.
it is required.
It's required because they don't have
Because it doesn't have the frontage, right? So it would be the equivalent of
Yeah,
that.
it
but-
doesn't
Yeah.
have the required frontage.
Right,
Right.
okay.
But so one of the findings in, for a hammerhead lot is that it allows for a better, a more advantageous configuration, or division of the property.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
they're presenting plans for, here's how the lot could be divided by a subdivision, by an A&R plan, and those aren't in the knowledge or purview of the Board of Appeals.
Oh.
So, that's why I felt it would be more appropriate for the planning board, who has that knowledge, to be able to make that finding and assessment that a hammerhead lot is more advantageous form of development.
Yeah. And I mean, I assume the ZBA will be pleased that we're taking some work off of them potentially, but we'll see. Okay, and then this is a new item for me, Elizabeth. It must be one that's kind of struck recently about that. There's walls and fences don't have any setback requirements, and that a property owner or developer could put up a 10-foot fence. I thought there was an 8-foot maximum.
No, there's civil action.
Yeah.
If somebody puts up an 8-foot fence, an adjacent property owner could file a civil suit,
Yeah,
like in land court, that it's a spite fence.
okay,
But there's no provision in zoning that, because the current setback requirements in the zoning bylaw say except fences and walls.
I see.
So,
And then a 13-foot retaining wall, that would
which
be quite
is
a,
currently shown on a preliminary subdivision plan that will be coming, that could be coming to the planning board.
holy
A
cow.
13-foot retaining wall. It's approximately 5 feet from the property line.
All right.
Okay, the Citadel.
So
So-
there are no setback requirements for walls or fences.
Wait, but when you say retaining wall, I'm literally with earth behind it?
Yes.
And it's 13
Yeah.
feet up?
Yes.
Yeah, so if they're flattening lots, basically, that's what happens.
Isn't there that's like a common law requirement about not blocking the light,
Well,
Again,
again,
civil
could there be a
action.
civil
Again,
action?
so we're talking about civil actions.
Yeah.
not,
Okay,
So when I talked about this with the, so what happens, just so the board knows, is that these things come up and I make check marks in the zoning bylaw saying, okay, really need to kind of look into
Yeah.
that one. So
That's great.
that was one that came up, and so when I discussed it with the building commissioner, in the building code, you need a building permit for a fence over 7 feet and a wall over 4 feet. It has to be structurally designed, and you
Okay.
need a
Yeah.
building permit. So I said, so I agree that those are great limits. Also, you think about a retaining wall, there's no requirement in zoning for the height, but there's also no requirement in the zoning that if you have a retaining wall that's 5 feet, that you have to have some type of fall protection or,
right.
so that's where, again, I felt,
Having a
4
special
feet
permit.
or less Was
Addresses that.
a reasonable, if you think about sitting on your property and your deck and your neighbor, that, if there was a retaining wall, a 4-foot retaining wall, a couple feet off the property line isn't too egregious.
Right.
When you start getting into, 6, 10, or 13 feet,
That 13-foot wall's gonna need a fence on top of it, so you don't go
Nope.
tipping over.
I don't think there's any requirement in the building code for residential.
They're gonna put a moat on the other side, some water.
All right, so that sounds worthy of discussion, and I think is a great proposal too. So this would be something we'd add to our agenda for annual town meeting.
Yes.
This would be
Yeah.
something we'd add on. Okay, then the next one, trailers are prohibited use, and some people are assuming that means that you can't park your camper for the winter.
Do we have, do you know, how does the language actually read? Because,
It specifically says that.
You can't
So-
park your camper for the winter.
You can't park your, $80,000, brand new Airstream on the side of your property for the winter.
What about my
it says you
2000
cannot, or that's what people are
No, that's
asserting?
what some people are
prohibited
asserting.
uses?
Yeah.
Oh.
So under 471, prohibited uses, and I will first say this is not the most well-written section, but salvage yard, junkyard, and all open-air storage of junk, waste, products, and salvage material, including non-operable automobiles, are expressly prohibited in all zoning districts of the town, as are trailer and mobile home, trailer camp, mobile home park, trailer and mobile home sales and services, billboards, outdoor movie theaters, commercial dump, slaughterhouse, rendering plant fertilizer, plant racetrack, commercial extraction of sand, gravel, and minerals, and all other uses which would be obnoxious, hazardous, or injurious to the neighborhood or to property in the vicinity are expressly prohibited in all zoning districts in the town, as are all uses not specifically permitted by this bylaw.
So I get that, there's a list,
It's
it
just-
sounds like some things followed by some uses.
Right, that's what I'm saying, how is parking something a use?
Well, the use of the thing, yeah.
No, so you would say prohibited uses, expressly prohibited in all zoning districts of the town are trailer and mobile home.
Yeah.
Right, I get
So if you took out everything else, that's basically the statement.
So we would have to amend this to say trailer used for habitation or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, this was, again, this is something that, we might make the check mark and we haven't, thought about
Right.
all the words. Because I was saying, you can't say, trailer and mobile home, used
Yeah.
for human habitation are expressly prohibited. Because the unintended consequences is somebody takes a mobile home, puts it on their property and says, oh, I'm just storing it there, nobody's living there. So that would be the unintended consequence that we don't want. But your Airstream trailer or your little pop-up camper, and then, my statement to him was, well, it just says trailer. What about your boat trailer or your landscape trailer or, how people.
Horse trailer.
Horse trailer. So all of.
Expressly prohibited.
So that's where, one person starts complaining because somebody parked,
Yeah.
this, huge fifth wheel, trailer next to the house during the winter, and the abutter doesn't like it, and they, well, it says right there, that is a trailer, yes.
What's the difference between the summer and the winter?
Nothing. But
Nothing,
It's
it's
just
just
somebody was
a common
complaining
thing.
about
That was just
particular-
somebody was complaining that it was parked there all winter.
In the summer, it was in Maine.
Yeah, where it was
Seeing
at
the
the,
world.
where it was at a place that does allow trailer camps.
Okay, so
So
we'll
I'm not quite
discuss
sure
that.
how, how that language, would fit in there yet.
Yeah.
But that was just something he brought up as
Okay.
being an issue. But again, if,
I can see it. It seemed punctilious, but I get it, because it seems like they've combined items and uses, and it's a little unclear.
Okay, next one. section 545, which is fairs, bazaars, antique shows, suppers, and dances.
It's back.
Didn't we just do this?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we dealt with that.
We just
Well, we
cleaned
did
it
it, but
up.
now I guess we left out something.
I mean, I thought
How
we
was
said
it, how
that
was it brought
public
to our attention that we're missing something?
authorities don't have to go get this.
That was for municipal
Yeah.
uses.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the existing section doesn't specifically say philanthropic or agricultural uses are allowed to get a special permit.
I see.
Why would it have to say they're allowed to get a special permit?
Because if something is not specifically specified,
Okay.
it is
Then
expressly
you can't even-
prohibited.
So all we
Okay,
would
yeah.
do is we would just add philanthropic and agricultural to the list that currently includes municipal, educational, or religious, or private lodge or club.
Correct.
Okay, that's
I'm just curious.
housekeeping.
So philanthropic and agricultural are adjectives. These are things, fairs, bazaars, antique shows. So you might have a philanthropic fair, supper, dance. What is
Running one.
philanthropic what?
Organization.
Agricultural what?
Phillips, a agricultural organization or a philanthropic organization.
Instead of a
'cause this-
religious
This
organization,
is municipal
yes.
organization, educational, religious, yeah.
Oh, I don't have the bylaw in front of me, so this
Yeah,
is.
the word
So
organization
it'd be the
follows
people
this
who,
list.
who can do this. So types of organizations who could do it would
Farm.
include philanthropic organization and agriculture.
Doing any of these things.
Got it.
Okay,
They're an agricultural, like how are they classified? They have events.
So like the Rotary Club, when they do their Oktoberfest, they actually get a special permit as a
private,
private
Lodge or
club.
club.
Okay.
Lodge or club. So, it's to clean, it's kind of to clean up an existing practice that's not.
But I mean, is it really, has it
Yeah.
prohibited anybody from doing it?
It's been brought into question a few times,
mean,
and
I don't-
recently by the Board of Appeals.
this will go on the consent.
That's fine,
calendar.
I just,
Yeah.
it's fine. But is there anything else that we're forgetting? That, like any other type of
For that
organization?
section?
Right,
Not off the top of my
Okay,
head.
okay.
but-
We'll wait till they bring
Well,
it
yeah,
up.
somebody else.
Okay, next one, accessory structures on corner lots. So basically, a corner lot it has two front yards, so it makes things a little harder for siting accessory structures. And the idea here is to liberalize that a little bit. So that if, as the building commissioner is asking, if the boards to discuss allowing accessory structures 200 square feet or less with an eave height of 10 feet. Do we have any other place where we specify eave height?
No,
I don't think it,
but it's defined, it's a structure that's 200 square feet or less with an eave height of 10 feet or less does not require a building permit.
oh, okay,
Yeah.
good. So this is just a structure that doesn't require a building permit, more or less, to be located within the side yard setback. If it is located behind the rearmost portion of the single-family dwelling opposite the front entrance,
So this is
the
where we
virtual
had,
backyard.
this
Yeah.
is where we had a difficult time because if you look at this example, this is a corner lot, but obviously the front entrance is on
Yeah.
this side, but there are, and we talked about opposite the address side, but there are some properties and corner lots in town where the address is on the opposite side from where the front entrance is. So we just thought about this yesterday, so we're not quite sure, whether that wording will work. And if anybody has any other suggestions on how.
So the idea on this, the yellow is where this person would like to put their shed.
Yep,
And you think the language as written would allow them to put
that's
it,
how the building commissioner interprets it.
that you can only right now put it there?
Because you have two fronts, and so the rearmost portion of the house is gonna be this back piece.
Mhm. You
and
gotta
this back
measure it
piece.
from both rears.
Yep,
Okay, so it can only go there, so what would we be changing?
We'd say we'd allow it to go into the setback, the side
So
setback.
anywhere in here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
as
up
long as
to-
it's behind the,
up to
Back
where
of-
the,
Other
so
setback
so long
line
as
is?
it's behind the rearmost portion of the house, and then it could go up to, you know, wherever the front yard setback starts. So in like residence C, that would be 20 feet, and then B, A, double A.
I have a couple
Wait, so
different,
it could go anywhere in this line?
Yeah.
really?
yeah,
Yeah.
pretty much.
Hmm.
I mean, not in the part that turns around,
I got it.
yeah. So, I mean, my feelings about this, first of all, are that a corner lot is different. That indeed, this shed would be a lot more visible than on a normal lot because people are going down that side part as a main road. And that it sort of comes with the territory, you got a corner lot. But also I don't have very strong feelings about it.
So I can tell you, you know, neither do we.
Okay,
So, you know, this was just added to the list for discussion for what the
Yeah.
board wants to present with the Board of Appeals. So the one thing about corner lots that is slightly different than a regular lot, if you were to look at this, if this was a standard lot, that the rear yard setback is 30 feet. So a corner lot is provided, you know, a slight advantage of where a structure can be located and meet the required setbacks, because you have
Yeah.
2 fronts and only, you know, 15 and 15 instead of 15 and 30.
mhm.
Um,
Right, so I just don't know why we have to make such an accommodation, but, you know,
Yeah, I mean, my view is if this would allow this to move out here, then you might start having issues where
Mhm.
people are
Right,
seeing
right.
a tough shed or whatever, you know, this is a non-permitted shed, right? That you said it doesn't require a permit, a building permit?
it's too small.
So somebody could be going down to Home Depot, putting a shed out almost near the sidewalk, right?
Well, it would be-
Within
no, it'd have-
15 feet.
And
Well,
the-
20
20
in
feet
residence
back.
C, and then it goes up from there in other zone districts.
Yeah. See, I think the current thing is fine, personally, but actually, the best location for the shed would probably be a little bit in here, but anyway.
So as I said, it's not, it was
This is
just
not a life or death, but okay. It'd be interesting to hear what the building commissioner has to say tomorrow night. Okay, then the next one, relief from parking. So this one is one of the ones I think that we really wanted to go after. We've come up with the criteria for how we evaluate applications for relief from parking. And those we've used for a couple years now, and I think they've been very helpful. What we'd like to do, I think, is to say that these become, you know, special permit criteria that then the ZBA would find in its granting of the special permit that the applicant has done this or that and the other.
So these 6 criteria would have to be, you know, reworded.
Reworded,
as-
because right now, I mean, if-
They're questions.
right, and some of them would, you know, no one's gonna have all, I think, being in the affirmative, most likely. Well, affirmative, they're not all affirmative, but I mean, they're not gonna have great answers necessarily for every single one of these, and yet they still might be granted the relief.
All right. We grant the relief, or we recommend that
We-
relief is granted, and then they make a decision?
Correct.
Yeah,
When are we gonna talk about, actually updating the parking requirements for use? So in other words, so that you wouldn't need relief as often because we're not requiring that you have this many spaces and going in the
Right.
future.
right, so I think that because we still haven't gone after this I mean, we'll talk with the ZBA tomorrow night about, see what they think, but I think when we go after this, changing these into standards, we probably should also look at the quantities.
Okay.
But that's a very technical point, you know, you actually need data.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, we talk about, I mean, point A right here. Have you provided documentation that's not in line with current industry standards, which is, I think, exactly what you're going to, which is, do we need to update our
standards so
use
that there would be
requirements
very
to
little-
current industry standards?
There'd be very little opportunity for someone to use A to override our standards at that point. Yeah.
Which that
Exact-
is still on your, you know, your list of goals, is to take the final report from MAPC. That was done, and also I just sent you the other link the other
Yeah,
day.
about why, yeah.
for this, perfect fit parking initiative that they did, which, it's.
Yeah, they're saying you only need 0.75 spaces per unit.
Well, so this was for only the inner core, though.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they were also suggesting, creating neighborhood structures that would drive more of an inner core feel, so that people
Right.
would
But
not
so if
feel
inner
so
core, it's,
obliged to have cars.
0.75, then, is two, and they were saying, specifically, there is a less demand for parking in developments close to transit centers, in, developments that have affordable housing. So again, when you think about actual parking requirements for, many communities are now going, it's not a parking minimum, it's a parking maximum. So, if you have an, affordable housing project, it may be, a maximum 1.5 units per.
Right.
But I think part of the, I'm gonna say, the synergy and what needs to happen is when you look at reducing or having parking maximums, is making sure that you are providing that alternative transportation. Still hopeful we'll find out in October if our grant for the shuttle is awarded. There seems to be a lot of support for it. We may also have an alternative funding source to help with that in the works. We'll know by October. So I think while definitely, looking at amending the zoning bylaw to, focus more on parking maximums instead of minimums, I think is a great idea. I think that it may not be this April, but I think the conversation and, as you said, the data and the research build on what MAPC did, build on this perfect fit parking initiative, and move forward when, we have a shuttle in place.
Okay, so I think we have a pretty good agenda for tomorrow night, and did anybody have any other ideas about what we should add on to this, or? Then I think that takes care of those things, and then the next is minutes, July 23rd. So I reviewed the minutes, and one thing that struck me when I saw them was that they repeated a number of points in a way that I thought, while totally accurate, was potentially confusing. So I was suggesting that some of those repetitions be removed, but I didn't make the suggestion in a way that was something that you could just click delete and delete the offending sections. So what Elizabeth and I have discussed is, why don't I take a crack at that, and we'll come back at the next meeting and approve the minutes.
Okay.
They're just from July 23rd, so it's not like we're in any danger of being in default of public information sharing. So that we'll take care of that. Then the next is liaison reports and staff updates. Any? No liaison reports.
Well, you went to.
Well, we had our select board
Yeah.
meeting, so we did all the talking for the most part. There were a few questions that came from the board and from the public. I think we discussed one of them tonight, which was, just, hey, how many accessory dwellings and two families do we have, and then how many do we think this action's going to create, and then as a consequence of that, what do we think the impact on schools and taxes would be? That was the logic that we heard, and I thought it was, a very valid set of things to ask about. So we need to keep after that set of points. And then lots of, there was the usual question about how much pavement area in the case of a two-family, and whether there'd be sort of a blight look. People always bring up like Somerville or Woburn or, something like that. And so far my response has been, well, those towns tend to have, or cities have, 5,000 square foot lots, and we're talking, minimum 10,000, unless you have a special permit. Well, and actually a special permit would be required in all cases, and so we'd be able to control that as well. I'm trying to remember any other feedback we got. Again,
Similar to the parking issue, and I think it came up a couple of times about with the accessory dwelling buildings and the two families still maintaining, the look and feel of.
oh, the look and feel of the
Concord. I
house.
think it came up. We expected it, but it came up a couple of times.
Yeah, and then there was this whole business of like, well, not having a maximum number of residents. Somebody was saying, well, we might assume that you can't put very many people at a 750 square foot place, but, that's not necessarily what other people think, and they might cram a bunch of people in there. So,
We have a lot of data about this already. Like on my street alone, and I live in near the town center.
yeah,
There's 4 two-family homes right
Yeah.
on my street, and you can't tell or what. I mean,
I know.
So I feel like we need to make sure people know this is already
no, but
in
there is a certain
existence
amount of
and-
fear, uncertainty, and doubt, I think.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think what we want to just help people to realize that, like we've said before, this was part of the town character,
Right.
and shouldn't detract from it going forward. Or we shouldn't jump to the conclusion that it definitely should detract from the character just
Yeah.
because we're allowing it.
So Nathan, I don't know if you recall anything else. It was me, Nathan, and Kate that were there presenting. We didn't actually call a joint meeting, because we didn't have a quorum. But anything else to relate?
I think you caught most of the main
Yeah,
comments.
I just talked a lot.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you did that. I think that was probably important to have that communication.
Okay, I think then we're done with our part of the agenda. Any public comment from the audience? Yes.
Linda Escobedo, Select Board, but speaking for myself, I just had a question and a comment, I guess, on the zoning bylaw for the accessory apartments.
Yeah.
Did I understand that in section K, since the building inspector is suggesting that he doesn't feel that that's an appropriate role, are you taking K out, or are you just going to modify it, or?
I think that we're going to discuss with the ZBA tomorrow night what an appropriate approach might be here. I think that, we could take it out, but what they're alternatively proposing is that we, set some
It'd be more specific.
situation in which, like, well, if the building is, less than the setback away from the thing, then you must provide screening, something like that, so that it becomes.
I'm not objecting to the concept in any way, I'm just.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So we just have to figure out the mechanism to assure that, as this gets implemented, that there are appropriate provisions made, so.
And then the second thing I wanted to comment on was the attempt to identify the existing number of accessory dwellings, and mindful of staff resources always when I make a suggestion. Is there any way to zero in on the 42 and identify how many people are in those 42 units? Thinking ahead for the objection, that.
Yeah,
We can zero in on the location, and other than what's public record, maybe in the street listing, that would be.
How's the town census managed? Is it private?
Probably
It's-
per address.
So I believe the town clerk may be able to provide
Aggregate statistics.
number of people, but is the
Yeah.
if it's somebody under 18, it's not public record, or I'm not
Right,
quite
but
sure what the
there will be a
limitations.
count from the census of how many, the town census. I mean, that's actually good data.
So she may be able to tell me if I gave her a list of addresses.
Yeah.
She may be able to tell me how many people that represents. I'm not sure she's able to tell me specifically for each address
School age.
how many people are, or school age, whether it's school age children or how many people live in that dwelling. That's a question I would have to specifically address to the town
It would be
clerk.
really interesting if you get
Or if you had addresses.
count by age.
Could you get the school to identify the number? You're not interested.
I don't know. I would definitely have to ask somebody who's,
But it's worth asking.
yeah.
Just trying to think about impact, questions.
Any other public comment? Okay, then I think we're ready to adjourn. And we'll meet again tomorrow night.
Yeah.
And right here, right?
So we're meeting here tomorrow at 7.